The earth has always carried within it the silence of vanished worlds. Beneath every field and forest, every desert and ocean floor, lie the muted remains of lives once lived. Bones pressed into stone, campfires reduced to shadows, and cities dissolved into dust. To stand upon the soil of today is to stand upon the forgotten layers of yesterday, where time itself has conspired to erase, to bury, and to conceal. Yet sometimes fragments break through. A chipped tool, a mural on a cave wall, the outline of a long-buried temple. They whisper of people who once breathed the same air, gazed at the same stars, and told stories of their own origins. But what if their stories carried truths we can no longer prove? What if the Earth's past was reset again and again by forces greater than memory, leaving behind only riddles that resist final answers? Before we journey deeper into these mysteries of deep time, consider adding your voice to this expedition. By subscribing, liking, and sharing, you help keep alive the conversation around humanity's forgotten past. This channel exists not only to tell stories, but to awaken wonder, to hold space for questions that stretch beyond history. Your presence makes this search more than solitary. It becomes a shared exploration. The first light that belonged to humankind was not the sun, nor the stars that had always watched in silence. It was the fragile flicker of fire, coaxed from stone, preserved from embers, stolen from lightning or lava, and guarded as if it were life itself. In the depths of the Pleistocene night, when shadows pressed close and the cries of predators echoed across the plains, that glow became a boundary between survival and oblivion. Fire was warmth in a frozen world, a sentinel against beasts with eyes that gleamed in the dark, and a gathering point where language itself may have learned to take form. Around its glow, silence became story, and hunger was transformed into ritual. It was here, in the circle of light cast upon rough earth and stone, that humanity first claimed a place of its own. Imagine the cold stretching across glacial steppes, the wind carrying with it the sting of ice that sliced through furs and bone alike. A small band of Homo sapiens huddles together, their world reduced to the circle of firelight. Beyond, the night is absolute, broken only by the faint howl of wolves and the vast emptiness of stars. Each figure feels the vulnerability of their existence. They are not yet masters of the earth. They are prey as much as hunter, wanderers surviving at the mercy of climate and chance. Yet within this fragile perimeter of flame, something begins that no other species can fully replicate. Memory passed as story, ideas exchanged in rhythm, the weaving of a collective mind. Archaeologists tell us that fire was tamed hundreds of thousands of years ago, perhaps earlier than we once imagined. Traces of ash at ancient campsites, scorched bones, and darkened cave walls reveal that our ancestors carried flame long before recorded history. But the meaning of that mastery cannot be reduced to science alone. Fire was not only a tool, it was a teacher. Its rhythm, the slow collapse of logs into glowing embers, the sparks that leapt skyward, must have impressed itself deeply into human thought. Did those sparks remind them of the stars, as above, so below? Did the flames become a mirror of life itself, fragile, consuming, always on the verge of vanishing if not carefully tended? One can almost hear the murmured voices circling the fire, broken by long pauses of silence. Perhaps these were not yet stories in the way we think of them, but patterns, fragments of myth beginning to take shape. A hunter gesturing with charred hands, tracing in air the memory of a kill. A child staring into the coals, eyes reflecting not just the flame, but the first stirrings of imagination. Fire allowed time for reflection. It extended the day into the night, creating a liminal space where humanity could think not only of the present, but of the past, and what might lie ahead. Around it, the mind stretched outward, and in the shadows just beyond the light, the seeds of wonder took root. The flicker of fire was also the first architecture, an invisible shelter against the darkness. Its presence defined space. Here, the safe zone. There, the abyss. Without walls or roofs, fire created the sense of home, and it demanded vigilance, for if it died, so too did safety. Someone was always tasked with keeping watch, feeding the flames with gathered branches. In this necessity, one finds the beginnings of responsibility, of shared labor that bound the group together. The fire belonged to no single individual. It was held in common, a collective possession that enforced cooperation, reminding every soul that survival was not solitary, but communal. And yet, fire was not merely practical. It awakened awe. Its shifting colors, the dance of orange, red, and blue, must have seemed alive, a spirit contained within wood. Many early cultures saw it as sacred, a gift from gods or ancestors, and though those stories would emerge later, the sense of reverence likely began here, in the ancient dark. To touch flame was to touch something that consumed, but also created, food roasted, tools hardened, predators driven back. To be burned was to learn respect for powers beyond one's control. Fire was both ally and destroyer, a paradox that mirrored the precarious condition of life itself. Across continents, evidence of early hearths reveals that wherever humans wandered, they carried light with them. From caves in Europe, where soot still clings to ceilings, to ancient African sites where ash testifies to warmth preserved against the night, the story repeats. Fire was the constant companion of migration, allowing people to move into colder climates, to endure winters that otherwise would have extinguished them. It is no exaggeration to say that humanity's expansion across the globe was written in trails of smoke that rose from countless campfires, each one a small sun against the void. Picture now a moment deep within a Paleolithic cave, where fire not only gave warmth, but light enough to paint upon walls. The flickering glow illuminated red ochre bison, black silhouettes of mammoth and lion, human handprints pressed like signatures across stone. Without fire, such art could not exist. Its illumination turned rock into canvas, transforming darkness into story. Did the painters believe they summoned the spirits of animals with every stroke? Did the flames make the painted beasts seem to move, their shapes shifting as shadows danced across the uneven walls? In this interplay of light and image, one can glimpse the birth of imagination entwined with the element itself. But fire also brought risk. A spark carried by wind could ignite grasslands. An untended blaze could consume a shelter. This duality must have haunted early humans. To lose fire was to face death, but to mishandle it was to invite destruction. The very act of mastering flame required not only knowledge, but discipline, restraint, and ritual. In the glow of the hearth, then, lies the beginning of responsibility, not just for survival, but for control of forces larger than oneself. The rhythm of life in these early days was set to the pulse of firelight. Dawn brought foraging and hunting, the gathering of fuel. Dusk returned the band to the circle of warmth, where embers were coaxed back to life. Night fell, and with it came both fear and possibility. In the blackness beyond, predators moved unseen, but in the heart of the fire, stories lengthened, shadows stretched, and humans began to imagine worlds beyond their own. It was in these long hours that myths were born, half dream and half memory, carried on the smoke that rose to the sky. Over generations, the fire became more than necessity. It was a thread tying each dawn to the next, a symbol of continuity. Children grew watching their elders tend the flames, learning that to keep fire alive was to keep the people alive. In its glow, humanity first practiced patience, foresight, and the art of waiting. Perhaps, in watching the collapse of burning logs, they saw the passage of time itself, the inevitable fading of all things into ash. Yet even in ash lay renewal, for from it fire could be kindled again. The image of early humans gathered at the hearth is not a mere artifact of imagination. It is a truth written into the very fibers of our memory. Modern people still seek the same warmth, in fireplaces, in candles, in the communal glow of screens. Something within us recalls those ancient nights when fire was both companion and oracle, a reminder that life is fragile but luminous, fleeting yet eternal in its repetition. And so, when we speak of beginnings, we must speak of fire. It was not invention alone, but initiation, the first dialogue between humanity and the elemental. In fire, we discovered both the fragility of existence and the possibility of transcendence. From its light, the path forward opened, not in certainty, but in wonder. For every flame was a question. How long will it last? What shadows will it cast? And what will be remembered when only embers remain? The chapter closes in the hush of that ancient night, with embers glowing like fallen stars upon the ground. Tomorrow the hunters will rise, the gatherers will search, and the children will learn again to watch the flames. But for now, silence rests between the sparks, and humanity leans into the warmth, unaware that in this simple circle lies the foundation of everything to come. When the great ice sheets began their slow retreat, rivers unchained themselves from glaciers and meadows stretched where once only barren frost had ruled. The Holocene dawned not with suddenness, but with a gentle unfurling, a long exhalation of the planet after epochs of cold. Into this shifting landscape, human bands moved like threads drawn together, weaving connections that would eventually bind them into something greater than wandering kin groups. Survival remained at the heart of existence, but within these expanding gatherings lay the first seeds of society, the first rhythms of ritual, music, and memory shared not only among families, but across the wide span of strangers. Picture a valley cut by a river swollen with snowmelt. Along its banks, tribes gather for the season's hunt. They come from scattered camps, following herds that graze on newly opened plains. Here, dozens of fires burn instead of one. The air is filled with more than smoke. It hums with voices, laughter, barter, and song. For a moment in deep time, humanity tastes the power of unity, of belonging to something larger than the fragile circle of immediate kin. In the meeting of tribes, new stories are traded like precious goods, and memory begins to stretch beyond the limits of any one family's survival. Archaeology gives us fragments of these encounters, beads of shell carried hundreds of miles from their shores of origin, ochre painted in patterns found across far-flung caves, flutes carved from bone that once released music into the stillness of night. These objects speak of exchange, of gatherings where ideas and artistry moved with as much importance as food or tools. To share was to survive, but to create was to transcend. A necklace of distant shells did not fill the belly, yet it declared identity, a sign to others that the wearer was part of a network wider than the horizon. The gathering of tribes was more than trade. It was the shaping of culture. around fires larger than any single band had known, rhythm was discovered not just in heartbeat or footstep, but in drumbeat and chant. Music arose, simple at first, a reflection of breath and bone, but soon swelling into patterns that stirred memory. To sing together was to become one, to align the pulse of many hearts. Even in silence, the memory of song lingered, binding people long after they had returned to their separate valleys. Ritual followed closely. The hunt was no longer just a practical necessity. It became a drama reenacted in gesture and symbol. Painted bodies circled fires, mimicking the movements of deer and bison, calling upon spirits both feared and revered. Perhaps these dances were meant to ensure success, to honor the lives taken, or to give shape to forces unseen. Whatever their purpose, they were acts that transformed survival into story, necessity into meaning. In ritual, death was acknowledged, loss was grieved, and joy was magnified. Here, in these gatherings, humans began to understand themselves as more than animals of flesh and hunger. They were storytellers of existence, interpreters of mystery. The landscapes themselves bore witness. Caves once silent echoed with footsteps and voices, walls covered in overlapping paintings created across generations. Stones arranged in circles began to rise, marking spaces not only for gathering, but for aligning with the heavens. To step into such a place was to step into continuity, a reminder that the present was woven into the past and into futures yet unseen. Each stone, each painted figure, each drumbeat was a declaration that life was not only endured, but celebrated, that humanity had discovered the power of shared memory. And yet, with gathering came both gift and tension. Larger groups meant safety, yes, but also rivalry. Who would lead? Whose stories would be believed? Which spirits were to be honored above the rest? Disputes over land, over animals, over pride must have flared in these seasonal convergences. Perhaps this is where the first diplomacy was born. Words standing in place of spears, gestures of alliance forged to prevent chaos. The gathering of tribes taught humanity not only to share, but also to negotiate, to balance the needs of the one against the needs of the many. Still, the overriding atmosphere was one of wonder. To live in a world so vast and wild, yet to find kinship across rivers and forests, must have been both comforting and awe-inspiring. Imagine standing at the edge of a great communal fire, hearing songs in unfamiliar tongues, watching figures painted in patterns different from your own. For the first time, you sense that your people are not alone, that the world is filled with countless others who dream, fear, and hope much as you do. Out of this awareness grows a new kind of consciousness, humanity as collective, humanity as more than tribe, humanity as species. One can almost feel the quiet power of those nights. After the day's feasting, after trade and dance, after laughter has faded into embers, silence returns. Yet it is no longer the silence of isolation. The valley is filled with the presence of hundreds, each campfire a heartbeat within a greater organism. The stars above reflect in the river below, and in that mirrored sky, people imagine themselves connected to something larger still. To share fire and story with strangers is to glimpse the possibility of eternity, of memory that stretches beyond death. The transition from small bands to gatherings was not a single moment, but a pattern repeated across millennia, in every corner of the earth where humanity wandered. From the plains of Africa to the forests of Europe, from the steppes of Asia to the coasts of the Americas, people learned that survival was strengthened by connection. They shaped pathways of trade, of marriage, of ritual exchange, and these pathways would one day become the arteries of civilization itself. What began as seasonal meetings of tribes foreshadowed the rise of villages, cities, and empires. But in those early days, the gatherings remained fragile, ephemeral as smoke. A river valley might be filled with voices one season and left to silence the next. No walls marked permanence, no scripts recorded decisions. Memory lived only in story and symbol, in the passing of beads and the repetition of song. Yet this was enough. It was the bridge between the fires of the dark past and the foundations of the future. To stand in such a gathering was to feel possibility alive in the air. The scent of roasted meat mixed with the perfume of wildflowers carried in from the meadows. Children ran between camps, their laughter carrying into the dusk. Elders leaned close, whispering myths of creation and destruction. Hunters sharpened tools, their movements practiced and patient. And somewhere, perhaps just beyond the edge of firelight, a lone figure carved a flute, releasing a note that rose into the night like a prayer, a sound carried on the wind across the valley, joining with the rhythm of countless hearts. This is where the story of humanity deepened. Alone, a band could survive. Together, tribes could endure, create, and remember. The gathering was not only a necessity of the Holocene, it was an awakening of spirit. For in seeing the faces of strangers, humanity saw itself, reflected, multiplied, eternal. And so the chapter closes not in silence, but in the chorus of many voices rising into the night, echoing across the river valley, carrying into the forests and hills beyond. A chorus that said, in its own way, we are more than one. The moment when humanity first placed roots into the earth marked a change as profound as the taming of fire. For untold generations, the rhythm of life had been movement, following herds across the plains, tracing rivers to their sources, leaving behind camps as quickly as they were built. But slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly, a new pattern began to take hold. Seeds were dropped, shoots were tended, animals once hunted were now herded, and the endless wandering paused. Out of this stillness rose the first settlements, places where the ground itself began to bear witness to continuity. Imagine a small cluster of dwellings by a riverbank, no longer mere temporary shelters, but walls of stone and clay that endure, season after season. Smoke rises from hearths not just for a night but for years. Fields stretch outward, their crops swaying in the wind, a human-made rhythm echoing the natural cycle of sun and rain. Within this new permanence, humanity discovered both security and vulnerability. For what is built can be lost, and what is rooted can be torn away. Yet the experiment of settlement continued, reshaping the story of survival into something altogether new. The Neolithic Revolution, as archaeologists call it, was less a revolution than a long awakening. Over centuries, people shifted from gathering what the land offered to cultivating what they required. Wheat, barley, lentils, millet. These grains and seeds became companions as vital as fire had once been. To till the soil was to enter into partnership with time itself, to trust in the unseen promise of growth. For the first time, humanity learned patience not as waiting for a hunt, but as waiting for the earth to answer. This patience, however, demanded new ways of life. Fields required care, protection from animals, and storage against famine. With farming came the need for granaries, for jars sealed with clay, for rituals to ensure the fertility of both soil and spirit. The settlement was not merely a place of residence, but a living organism, its survival dependent on countless hands laboring in rhythm. To live in a village was to learn cooperation anew, to see one's fate bound tightly to that of others. And with permanence came ancestry. Nomadic bands carried their dead with them in memory alone. But in settlements, the dead could be buried beneath the very floors of houses, or within nearby mounds that rose like silent guardians over the land. To live in one place was to live alongside the spirits of those who had come before, to feel continuity pressing down from the past into the present. In this way, the settlement became not only shelter for the living, but a shrine to memory. Monuments emerged from this soil of permanence. Circles of stone, like those at Stonehenge, began as wooden posts and later became massive stones hauled across miles. Their purpose remains uncertain, astronomical, ceremonial, funerary, but their presence is undeniable. They declare, here is a people who no longer move with the seasons. Here is a people who intend to remain. These structures, aligned with solstices and equinoxes, suggest a new intimacy with the heavens, as if rooting into the earth demanded also a rooting into the sky. Time was measured not only in days of hunger and harvest, but in cycles of sun and star, embedding human life within the greater rhythm of the cosmos. Yet permanence carried shadows. Where nomadic life had distributed risk, settlements concentrated it. A failed harvest meant famine for all. Stored grain attracted pests, thieves, and enemies. Walls once built for shelter soon needed to defend against those who coveted what lay within. The vulnerability of permanence was the price of stability, and from this tension rose the seeds of conflict and power. Those who guarded the stores became powerful. Those who blessed the fields became revered, and inequality took root as surely as crops themselves. But within the daily life of these settlements, there was still beauty. Children grew not amid the uncertainty of endless travel, but within the familiarity of home. Generations shared the same hearths, shaping traditions that stretched further back than memory could hold. Crafts blossomed, pottery fired with care, weaving that transformed fibers into patterns, figurines carved to embody spirits of fertility and protection. Each artifact speaks of lives not only endured, but celebrated, lives in which art and necessity intertwined until they were indistinguishable. In places like Çatalhöyük, we find evidence of entire communities where houses pressed together into honeycomb patterns, entered not by doors, but from rooftops. The walls were painted with hunting scenes, with goddesses, with vultures and bulls. Shrines filled with figurines suggest a people who saw the sacred woven into daily life, where the act of grinding grain or shaping clay was as spiritual as it was practical. To walk those narrow passageways would have been to feel enclosed within a living labyrinth, a city not yet a city, but already humming with the density of shared existence. And so the village became a crucible. Out of its hearths and fields, humanity learned new truths, that permanence fosters memory, that roots carry weight, that progress is as much vulnerability as triumph. To settle was to risk losing freedom, yet also to gain continuity. To sow was to trust, but also to fear the unknown seasons. Within this paradox, humanity grew not only in number, but in imagination, for permanence allowed time to ponder, to dream, to build. Perhaps in the quiet of evening, when fields were tended and the village fires burned low, someone stood gazing at the horizon, remembering the days when ancestors followed the herds. Did they feel nostalgia for the freedom of wandering, or pride in the rootedness of stone and earth? Did they imagine what lay ahead, structures taller than mountains, cities vast as valleys, or disasters that could sweep it all away? In such reflections lies the essence of humanity's unfolding, always between memory and hope, between what is gained and what may be lost. The first settlements were not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, one that would carry humanity toward the rise of cities, empires, and civilizations whose echoes still haunt us. But in their fragile walls, in their patient fields, in their graves and shrines, they held the essence of a shift that can never be undone. Humanity had stepped out of the eternal cycle of migration and placed its weight upon the earth, declaring, "We will remain." And in that declaration lay both triumph and tragedy. For what is rooted may one day be uprooted. What is built may crumble, and what is remembered may fade. Yet even in ruins, the story endures. The first settlements taught us that to endure is to leave traces, and that in those traces, the earth itself becomes memory. The chapter ends with the image of twilight settling over a Neolithic village. Smoke drifts upward, fields ripple in the evening breeze, and children play among stones that will outlast them. Beneath their feet, ancestors lie buried, and above their heads, stars shine in silent witness. The world is still fragile, still perilous, but within these walls of clay and stone beats the first heartbeat of civilization. There are places on the earth where the soil remembers more than the living do. Places where half-buried stones whisper of hands that once shaped them, where forgotten foundations break through the grass, and where silence lies heavier than the wind. To walk among such ruins is to feel the presence of civilizations that should not exist, at least not where or when they do. For history tells us a simple story of progress: nomads settling, villages growing, cities rising. Yet scattered across continents are sites that defy this neat line, places where sophistication blooms too early, where artistry outpaces explanation, where the echoes of civilizations lost remind us that memory is fragile and history incomplete. One such echo lies beneath the soil of southeastern Turkey. Göbekli Tepe, a name now uttered with awe among archaeologists, slumbered for 12,000 years before the modern world uncovered it. When first excavated, the site was staggering. Massive T-shaped pillars arranged in circles, carved with foxes, lions, vultures, and serpents, all dating to an age when humanity was thought to be no more than scattered bands of hunter-gatherers. How, in the dawn of the Holocene, could people with no cities, no wheels, and no metal raise stones weighing tons, align them with care, and carve into them symbols of power and mystery? Göbekli Tepe tells us that sophistication arrived not late, but early, as if memory of older ways was carried into the new age. And Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Across Anatolia, at Çatalhöyük, murals depict hunting scenes, geometric patterns, and perhaps even mythic stories. Burials beneath floors speak of ancestors bound into daily life, while shrines filled with figurines suggest rituals of fertility and renewal. This was no mere village. It was a proto-city, dense, vibrant, ritualistic, existing millennia before the great civilizations of Mesopotamia. Who taught these people to live so closely, to build so deliberately, to remember so vividly? Beyond Anatolia, whispers come from other lands. Along the once mighty Saraswati River of India, now vanished beneath desert sands, ruins of settlements remain, hinting at complex societies whose memory is preserved only in myth and scripture. In South America, vast stone blocks rest in places like Tiwanaku, their cuts so precise they defy simple explanation, their alignments hinting at an astronomy far older than we had believed. Off the coasts of Japan, beneath the waves of Yonaguni, stone terraces and stairways sink into silence. Are they natural formations, or the remnants of an age lost to the sea? Debate continues, but the sense of mystery endures. Even more haunting are the cultures that left no cities, but whose influence remains etched into landscapes. In the Orkney Islands of Scotland, Neolithic stone circles and burial chambers stand against the winds, their sophistication rivaling that of Stonehenge, yet predating it. In Malta, megalithic temples curve with astonishing grace, their massive stones forming sanctuaries aligned with solstices. To walk among them is to feel the persistence of memory across deep time, as though the stones themselves carry voices too faint for us to hear. Everywhere the echoes converge. Across continents, people who supposedly had no contact with one another raised monumental stones, aligned with the stars, carved with symbols of fertility, death, and rebirth. Why? Was this simply coincidence, the natural outcome of human imagination responding to sky and earth? Or was there something shared, a memory carried in stories older than settlement itself, a remembrance of an earlier age now erased? This is where speculation stirs. Some suggest that myths of floods, fires, and golden ages are not mere imagination, but memory of civilizations that thrived before being swept away. The Younger Dryas, with its sudden cold and devastating changes, has been proposed as the curtain that fell on such societies. If so, then the monuments we find scattered across the globe may be fragments, not beginnings, echoes of something older that refused to die entirely. Yet archaeology, cautious as ever, resists certainty. Each site is studied, dated, measured, and framed within the known arc of history. Göbekli Tepe is remarkable, but not impossible. Tiwanaku's stones are mysterious, but within the capacity of human hands. Yonaguni may be natural, its shapes carved by waves rather than masons. And yet, even as reason holds the reins, the echoes grow louder. For whether by coincidence or continuity, the world is strewn with signs that humanity's past may not be as linear as we once believed. Consider the persistence of certain symbols. The serpent, winding and coiled, appears on Göbekli Tepe, in Mesoamerican myths, and in the cosmologies of Africa and Asia. The vulture, with wings outstretched, looms in carvings both in Anatolia and across the Mediterranean. Spirals, circles, and solar motifs emerge again and again, across cultures separated by oceans and millennia. Is this merely human imagination converging upon the same images? Or do these symbols preserve memories older than language, carried across generations until they became universal marks of mystery? Standing among these ruins, one feels less like a discoverer than an intruder. The air is thick with questions that may never find answers. Who were the people who built these structures? What did they see in the heavens that compelled them to lift stones against the sky? What rituals echoed within their circles? What chants rose with the smoke of their fires? And why, after such effort, did they abandon their works, leaving them to be buried, forgotten, and only rediscovered in an age that barely understands them? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between myth and science. Perhaps these echoes are not proof of a vanished advanced civilization, but reminders that human imagination, even in its earliest days, was more powerful than we admit. The capacity to dream, to carve, to align with stars, may have been as ancient as fire itself. If so, then the mystery is not that these ruins exist, but that we once believed they could not. The earth holds its silence well. Soil covers stone, forests reclaim fields, seas rise to swallow coastlines. Yet even silence leaves traces, and the echoes of civilizations lost remain scattered across the globe, stubborn against time. They remind us that the story of humanity is not a straight line, but a tapestry frayed at its edges, with patterns lost and rediscovered, repeated and reimagined. As night falls on such ruins, one can imagine fires burning again, chants rising against the stars, shadows dancing upon stones. The echoes are not gone. They vibrate beneath the surface, waiting for ears willing to hear. And as archaeologists brush away soil, as divers descend into depths, as myths are retold by firesides, the voices of these lost civilizations return, faint but insistent. The chapter closes with the image of Göbekli Tepe at dawn, its massive stones rising from the earth like the ribs of a forgotten giant. Birds circle overhead, their cries carrying across the hills. The air is heavy with silence, yet that silence hums with presence. Civilizations may vanish, but their echoes remain, etched into stone, whispered by myth, haunting the memory of the earth itself. Long before words were pressed into clay tablets or carved into stone, they were carried by voices. Around fires, across valleys, along rivers, and over mountains, stories traveled with the people who told them. Myths are older than writing, older than agriculture, older, perhaps, than the very settlements that first anchored humanity to the soil. And within them, hidden among gods, monsters, and miracles, may lie the faint outlines of memory, fragments of history preserved not as fact, but as story, transformed across generations into the language of the sacred. The flood is among the most enduring. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh recounts a deluge so vast that it erased almost everything, leaving only the chosen survivor, Utnapishtim, who preserved life in a great boat. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah's Ark floats upon waters sent to cleanse the earth. In Hindu tradition, Manu is warned by a divine fish to build a vessel before a cosmic flood overwhelms the world. Across the Americas, from the Maya to the Hopi, tales of inundation abound. In Polynesia, islands rise and fall beneath waves sent by gods. Again and again, across cultures separated by oceans and centuries, the world is destroyed by water, and life is saved by those who remember. Is this coincidence, the universal human fear of drowning given shape in story? Or is it memory, passed down from survivors of real cataclysms, melting ice sheets, sudden storms, tsunamis, and rising seas that swallowed coastlines at the end of the last ice age? Archaeologists note that around 12,000 years ago, as the Younger Dryas ended, oceans rose hundreds of feet, drowning lands that once connected continents, erasing settlements from memory. Could myths of floods be the memory of these drownings, reshaped over millennia into sacred stories of wrath and renewal? Myths do not preserve detail. They preserve essence. Fire stolen from the gods, as in the tale of Prometheus, may be no more than a story to explain the mystery of flame. But perhaps it also remembers a moment when fire was still fragile, when its mastery seemed a gift too powerful to be explained by human hands alone. Giants and titans, gods and demigods, do they echo not literal beings, but the awe with which ancestors regarded forces beyond their comprehension, be they volcanic eruptions, towering glaciers, or elders whose knowledge seemed infinite? Take the serpent. In Sumerian myth, the serpent steals immortality. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl is the feathered serpent, bringer of wisdom. In Norse tradition, Jörmungandr coils around the world, destined to rise in destruction at Ragnarok. In India, the Naga guard treasures and wisdom beneath rivers and oceans. The serpent is universal, appearing wherever myths are told. Why? Is it the memory of snakes, feared and revered for their venom and their shedding skins? Or is it a deeper symbol, the cycle of death and rebirth, the winding of rivers, the spiral of galaxies, something humanity could sense but not yet explain. Even the sky is filled with memory. Constellations are myths written in stars, connecting hunters, lovers, warriors, and beasts across cultures. Orion strides above both Greek and Egyptian horizons. The Pleiades cluster is hunted in the myths of Australia's Aboriginal peoples, sung of in the traditions of Japan, and feared in the Americas. To different people, the same stars told different stories, but their presence in myth reveals something more. A memory of watching the heavens together, of embedding human life in the rhythm of the cosmos. What makes myths powerful is not their accuracy, but their endurance. They survive because they speak to human fears and hopes, to questions of origin, death, and renewal. But endurance also suggests resilience, that these stories were carried because they mattered, because they contained knowledge worth remembering. In cultures without writing, memory had to be preserved in ways that could not be forgotten. To embed it in myth was to ensure its survival, not as cold fact, but as living narrative. Consider the myth of fire raining from the sky. In many traditions, gods punish humanity with fire, Zeus hurling lightning, or tales of fiery stars crashing to earth. The Tunguska explosion of 1908 showed us what such events can look like. Forests flattened, skies burning. Did ancient people witness meteors, comets, or volcanic eruptions and encode them into myth so that their descendants would remember the power of the sky? Similarly, myths of great darkness, suns swallowed, skies blackened, may recall eclipses or volcanic winters. The eruption of Thera around 1600 BCE reshaped the Aegean world. Some see its echo in the myth of Atlantis, a memory of islands destroyed by the sea. Even more subtle are myths of origin. Across continents, humanity tells stories of having come from beneath the earth, from caves, from mountains. The Hopi emerged from the underworld. The Greeks spoke of people born from stones. In Siberia, ancestors rose from beneath the ice. Perhaps these are metaphors for birth itself, or perhaps they echo the literal reality of early humans sheltering in caves, of survival through ages of darkness, of emergence into new lands after glaciers retreated. The myth of origin is both story and survival manual, memory coded into metaphor. Skeptics will say, myths are imagination, nothing more. They are the human mind reaching for meaning in a world filled with mystery. And this is true. But imagination itself is memory transformed. A flood myth may not recall a single deluge, but the impression of many floods, remembered not as history, but as warning. A serpent may not recall one snake, but the awe of countless encounters across millennia. Myth is memory distilled, not precise, but powerful, resilient in ways that fact alone cannot endure. To listen to myth, then, is to listen to humanity's earliest archive. It is not accurate in the way archaeology demands, but it is alive, carrying echoes that science alone might overlook. When myths converge across continents, when floods, serpents, and fiery skies appear again and again, it may be coincidence, or it may be that memory, like water, finds its way through stone, leaving traces no matter how deeply time tries to bury them. Perhaps this is why myths remain so captivating even in the modern age. We no longer gather around campfires to tell them as survival guides, yet they still hold us. They remind us of what was once endured, of what was once feared, of what might still come again. They are not obsolete. They are timeless, because they encode the essence of being human. The fragility of life, the vastness of the cosmos, the inevitability of change. And so, in the silence of ancient ruins, in the darkness of caves painted with hands long vanished, in the songs of storytellers who never knew writing, the myths continue to speak. They tell us of floods that may have been real, of fires that may have fallen, of beasts that may have walked beside us. They tell us, above all, that memory is never entirely lost. It is transformed, hidden in story, awaiting those who know how to listen. The chapter closes in the image of a storyteller by a Neolithic hearth, shadows flickering against stone walls. Children listen wide-eyed as the tale of a great flood is told, of ancestors who built a vessel and survived when the world drowned. Outside, the river flows quietly beneath the stars, its waters carrying not catastrophe, but memory. Yet within the story, the flood still lives, preserved as myth, echoing across generations like the steady heartbeat of the earth itself. History, as we inherit it, often unfolds like a steady march, the gradual rise of agriculture, the flowering of settlements, the slow birth of civilization. Yet beneath this reassuring line lurks another rhythm, one far less forgiving, the rhythm of catastrophe. Time and again, the earth has reminded humanity that permanence is an illusion. Volcanoes, earthquakes, floods, meteors, and sudden shifts in climate have rewritten the story of life, wiping out what seemed secure, scattering survivors, and burying memory beneath ruin. To ignore catastrophe is to misunderstand our past. To remember it is to realize how precarious survival has always been. The Younger Dryas stands as a warning carved into the climate itself. Around 12,900 years ago, just as the Ice Age was ending and warmth seemed to promise stability, the world turned suddenly cold. Glaciers halted their retreat. Winters deepened, crops failed in lands newly tamed, hunters found animals scarce again. The cause remains debated, the melting of glacial lakes flooding into oceans, a disruption of global currents, or perhaps even an extraterrestrial event, a comet or meteor breaking apart in the skies. Whatever the reason, the effect was devastating. For more than 1,000 years, humanity faced a return to hardship, just as permanence was beginning to root itself into soil. It is tempting to see this as mere environmental fluctuation, but to those who lived through it, the change must have felt apocalyptic. Imagine fields once fertile turning barren, herds dwindling to shadows, rivers freezing where once they ran free. Settlements, newly born, were abandoned. People moved again, carrying stories of cold and hunger. Could it be that the flood myths, the tales of fire from the sky, the warnings of wrathful gods, are echoes of this sudden chaos? For when nature turns, it does so with a force that feels indistinguishable from divinity. Volcanoes, too, have shaped our memory through terror. The eruption of Thera around 1600 BCE unleashed waves that swallowed islands and darkened skies across the Mediterranean. The city of Akrotiri on Santorini was entombed in ash, its frescoes frozen in time. Its inhabitants vanished. Some see in this disaster the seed of Plato's tale of Atlantis, a proud civilization destroyed in a single day and night, swallowed by the sea. Millennia earlier, Mount Toba in Indonesia erupted with a fury so immense that it nearly extinguished humanity itself, reducing populations to a handful of scattered survivors. The ash spread across continents, skies darkened, and the world grew cold. Perhaps, in whispers passed down through time, people remembered and retold such horrors until they became legend. Earthquakes left their scars as well. Cities built upon fault lines rose and fell with tremors. Entire coastlines shifted. Tsunamis surged inland with the force of mountains, sweeping away everything in their path. In Japan, myths of dragons beneath the sea may echo the power of tectonic upheaval. In Greece, Poseidon shook the earth with his trident, a god of the sea, but also of tremors. Such myths may be less invention than memory, attempts to explain the inexplicable, to give name and story to forces that shattered lives in an instant. Even the heavens are not exempt. Meteors strike rarely, but when they do, the memory endures. The Tunguska blast in Siberia in 1908 flattened forests across hundreds of miles. Imagine if such an event had occurred 10,000 years earlier, when the survivors had no way to measure or explain it. Fire falling from the sky, trees leveled, animals slain, nights filled with strange light. Such a memory would become myth, a tale of God's anger or celestial war. Could the younger Dryas itself, with its sudden devastation, have been triggered by such a strike? Some fragments of evidence suggest it, though certainty eludes us. Still, the possibility lingers, a shadow across our understanding. What makes catastrophe so haunting is not only the destruction it brings, but the silence that follows. Settlements vanish, and in their place, only stones remain. Populations shrink, and with them, stories fade. What once seemed eternal can vanish in a season. And yet, catastrophe is also renewal. Forests regrow, new rivers carve valleys, survivors adapt and endure. Humanity has always walked between destruction and rebirth, carrying with it the memory of loss and the determination to continue. This duality is reflected in myth. Floods destroy, but they also cleanse. Fire consumes, but it also creates. Earthquakes break the land, but they also open springs. Catastrophe is not only the end, but the beginning of something else, a force both feared and revered. Perhaps this is why so many rituals revolve around cycles of death and rebirth, of endings followed by renewal. Humanity has always known instinctively that the shadow of catastrophe is never far away, and that survival depends not on denying it, but on remembering. Even today, when science seeks to explain what myth once encoded, the awe remains. We measure volcanic ash and ice cores, date tsunamis and sediment layers, trace meteor impacts in craters and shattered stone. Yet behind every measurement is the same realization our ancestors must have felt, that the Earth is not a stable home, but a restless one, capable of turning against us without warning. Civilization rests on thin soil, and beneath it, forces older and stronger than memory. Imagine standing at Göbekli Tepe as the younger. Dryas ended, watching hunters and builders alike abandon their work, forced again into wandering. Imagine walking the streets of Akrotiri the day before the sky darkened, unaware that tomorrow the sea would rise. Imagine gazing at the stars, only to see one fall, breaking into fire that shook the very ground. For those who lived these moments, memory was not myth. It was survival, encoded into story so that descendants might remember, even if they did not fully understand. The shadow of catastrophe lingers still. Modern civilization, with its cities of glass and steel, feels secure, yet it too rests on fragile ground. The memory of past disasters reminds us that permanence is an illusion. We are inheritors not only of survival, but of loss, of resilience carved by fire, flood, and stone. To walk forward without remembering is to risk repeating the same forgetting, to build as though the earth will always remain still. The chapter closes with the image of a ruined city, its stones half buried, its walls crumbled by forces long forgotten. Grass grows through cracks, birds nest where people once prayed. Silence reigns, yet in that silence lies the echo of catastrophe, a reminder that what is lost is never truly gone, for memory persists, whether in story, in stone, or in the restless heart of the earth itself. Long before telescopes reached into the heavens, long before equations described the orbit of planets, humanity looked upward and saw patterns. The night sky was both map and mystery, a vast dome where stories were written in constellations, where time was measured in the slow march of stars, and where destiny itself seemed inscribed. To early societies, the heavens were not distant, they were present, woven into the rhythm of daily life, reflected in stone and earth. Across continents, monuments rose that aligned not with rivers or mountains, but with the movement of the sun, the tilt of solstices, the dance of lunar cycles. These stones, silent and enduring, speak to the stars, carrying within them humanity's first attempts to bind the earth to the cosmos. Consider Stonehenge. On the Salisbury Plain of England, massive stones stand in rings and horseshoes, their alignments precise to the rising sun of midsummer and the setting sun of midwinter. To modernize, it is a ruin, its purpose obscured by millennia. But to those who raised its megaliths, it was no ruin. It was a living calendar, a temple, a bridge between heaven and earth. On the longest day of the year, the first rays of the sun strike directly through its axis, illuminating the circle with light. Was it a celebration of life renewed, a reassurance that darkness would not prevail? Or was it something deeper, a ritual acknowledgement that humanity's fate was bound to the turning of the heavens? Stonehenge is not alone. Across the globe, ancient structures stand in alignment with celestial events. At Newgrange in Ireland, a passage tomb older than the pyramids, the rising sun of the winter solstice floods a dark chamber with light, illuminating carvings of spirals and circles. In Chaco Canyon in North America, great houses align with solstices and lunar standstills, their builders tracking cycles that unfold only once every 18 years. In Egypt, the Great Pyramids of Giza are arranged with uncanny precision to the cardinal points, their shafts pointing toward Orion's belt and Sirius. In the Andes, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman and the temples of Machu Picchu align with solstices and equinoxes, embedding stone within the rhythm of the sky. What unites these monuments is not their architecture, which varies, but their intention: to bring the stars to earth. To stand within them is to witness the cosmos drawn down into stone, to feel that human life was measured not by fleeting seasons alone, but by cycles written across eternity. These alignments suggest not only observation, but reverence. The sun and moon were not cold bodies of rock and fire. They were gods, ancestors, or cosmic forces whose movements shaped fate itself. To mark their rising and setting was to commune with powers beyond mortality. But why build in stone? Why spend generations hauling monoliths, carving passages, arranging blocks, when observation could be made with nothing more than the naked eye? The answer may lie not only in utility, but in memory. Stone endures. Where stories fade and fires die, stone remains. To align stone with the heavens was to preserve knowledge across generations, to ensure that even when storytellers were gone, the rising sun would still pierce the chamber, the stars would still align with carved axes, and the lesson would remain visible to all. In this sense, the monuments are libraries, repositories of memory written not in words, but in light and shadow. Some see in these alignments hints of sophistication beyond what we once believed possible. How could people without telescopes or modern instruments track cycles so long and so subtle? How did they calculate the 18-year rhythm of the moon or the precession of stars across centuries? Were these achievements the product of careful observation across countless lifetimes, knowledge passed faithfully from one generation to the next? Or do they hint at something else, a memory of older knowledge carried into younger ages, fragments of an inheritance now lost? Speculation abounds, but certainty remains elusive. What is clear is that these stones speak not only of astronomy, but of spirituality. They are not mere observatories, they are sanctuaries. To walk through their passages, to watch light pierce darkness, was likely an act of ritual, a moment of communion with forces beyond comprehension. The heavens dictated planting and harvest, birth and death, ritual and renewal. In aligning stone to sky, humanity did more than measure time. It sought to participate in eternity. The symbolism carved into these monuments deepens the mystery. Spirals, circles, and serpents adorn walls and stones, motifs repeated across cultures. The spiral may represent the sun's path, the turning of seasons, or the journey of life and death. The serpent, ever present, may embody cycles of renewal, or the winding of rivers that mirror the Milky Way itself. Such symbols suggest that these stones were not simply practical, but philosophical, embodying a worldview in which humanity, Earth, and cosmos were inseparably bound. And yet, even as we marvel at these achievements, questions persist. Why were some sites abandoned? Why were others buried, as if hidden deliberately from time? Were these monuments built as promises to the future, or as memorials to the past? Did they serve to unite communities through shared ritual, or to mark power through control of cosmic knowledge? Each possibility lingers, unanswered, leaving us with silence where explanation should be. Perhaps that is the point. The stones are not textbooks. They are mysteries. They do not give answers, but invite questions. To stand within them is to feel both awe and humility, to realize that our ancestors, long before telescopes, gazed at the same stars we see today and found meaning there. Their stones remind us that the universe has always been our companion, that humanity's story has never been confined to Earth alone. As the sun rises through Stonehenge on midsummer morning, crowds gather even now, modern pilgrims standing where ancient ones once stood. The same light strikes the same axis, bridging millennia. In that moment, one feels the persistence of memory, the endurance of intention. The stones continue to speak, their language unchanged, their message eternal. We are part of the cosmos, and the cosmos is part of us. The chapter closes with the image of night falling over a megalithic circle. Stars wheel above in silent arcs, mirrored by the stones below. The air is still, the earth quiet, and yet the space hums with presence, as though the stones themselves are listening, waiting for the dawn that will once again draw heaven to earth in a line of light. The ocean is both cradle and grave. It has carried life since the beginning, shaping continents and carving shorelines, feeding humanity with its abundance and terrifying it with its fury. But beyond its surface lies silence, a silence that conceals as much as it reveals. Beneath the waves are landscapes once dry, valleys where rivers once ran, plains where people once walked. When the Ice Age ended and glaciers melted, seas rose hundreds of feet, swallowing coastlines and erasing settlements. What today lies beneath salt water may once have been home to civilizations forgotten, their ruins entombed in silence. It is no wonder, then, that myths of lost lands beneath the sea persist across the world. Atlantis, the most famous, comes to us from Plato, a great island empire, rich and powerful, which in a single day and night was swallowed by the ocean. Scholars debate whether Plato invented the story as allegory, but its resonance cannot be denied. From Europe to the Americas, from Asia to Oceania, people tell stories of cities drowned, islands destroyed, worlds erased by waves. Are these simply metaphors of hubris punished, or do they echo real memories of coastlines lost to rising seas? Consider Dwarka, a city of Indian myth said to have been built by Krishna himself, its towers and palaces gleaming until it sank beneath the waters. For centuries it was story alone, but recent underwater surveys off the coast of Gujarat revealed stone structures, walls, and artifacts resting beneath the silt. Debate rages as to their age and origin, yet their existence blurs the line between memory and imagination. Could Dwarka be both myth and history, its story magnified by legend, but its root grounded in truth? Farther east, off the coast of Japan, divers discovered the Yonaguni Monument, terraces, steps, and what appear to be pyramidal shapes carved into bedrock. Some insist they are natural formations shaped by geological forces. Others argue they are too precise, too deliberate, their angles too measured to be mere accident. If they are human-made, they would belong to a time when sea levels were far lower, to an age long before recorded history. Natural or not, they have become a symbol of possibility, that the ocean still hides chapters of humanity's past. Even in Europe, memory lingers of lands drowned. Doggerland, once a vast plain connecting Britain to the continent, stretched across what is now the North Sea. For thousands of years, people hunted, fished, and lived there until rising seas swallowed it. Today, trawlers dredge up bones, tools, and remnants from its vanished world. Was Doggerland remembered in northern myths of flood and loss, in sagas that speak of drowned lands and vanished kin? It is not hard to imagine survivors watching their homes sink, carrying stories of destruction to their children, who pass them down as warnings and laments. And then there is Bimini, in the Bahamas, where submerged stone formations known as the Bimini Road spark speculation. To some, they are natural. To others, they are remnants of ancient construction. Their mystery is amplified by local lore and the suggestion, made famous by mystics, that they are part of Atlantis itself. While skepticism prevails, the allure remains. The ocean, after all, is vast, and much of it remains unexplored. If civilizations were lost to its depths, how much would remain hidden beneath silt, coral, and waves? Archaeology offers a sober truth. Sea levels have risen more than 300 feet since the last ice age. Entire coastlines where early settlements likely stood are now submerged. If humanity's first great societies flourished along rivers and shores, as logic and evidence suggest, then countless sites now rest beneath the sea, unreachable, undiscovered, forgotten. What we see on land may be only fragments, the surviving highlands of a world once much larger. To truly understand our past, we would need to walk where the waves now roll, but myth gives these drowned lands voice. In the Pacific, Polynesian traditions speak of islands swallowed by the sea, of ancestors forced to flee in canoes. In the Americas, stories tell of shining cities lost beneath lakes and oceans. In Celtic lore, Lyonesse, a land once stretching from Cornwall into the sea, sank beneath waves, its bells still said to toll beneath the water. In each culture, the ocean is not only boundary, but memory, a reminder that what lies beneath may once have been alive with song, fire, and life. Could it be that Atlantis, Dwarka, Yonaguni, and others are not singular truths, but collective memories, each culture recalling its own flood, its own drowning, its own lost shore? To those who lived through such moments, the world itself seemed to end. To us, separated by millennia, their stories converge into a chorus of lament, fragments of a larger truth we may never fully know. And yet, the ocean continues to conceal. Even with modern technology, we have mapped only a fraction of its depths. The seafloor hides mountains taller than Everest, trenches deeper than imagination, and perhaps ruins waiting in silence. Each year, new discoveries emerge: submerged forests, ancient tools, hints of settlements along drowned coastlines. Each discovery is both revelation and reminder that the ocean is not empty, but filled with memory. Speculation inevitably reaches outward. Some suggest that advanced civilizations may have risen and fallen before recorded history, their remains swallowed by rising seas. Others imagine connections to myths of gods descending from the heavens, teaching skills to mortals before vanishing into the deep. While evidence remains elusive, the possibility lingers, fueled by the silence of the ocean itself. Silence is fertile ground for wonder. But perhaps the truth is simpler and no less profound. Humanity has always lived by the water. Rivers gave us sustenance, seas gave us passage, coasts gave us abundance. To live by the water is to risk loss, for the ocean rises as well as recedes. The drowned lands and sunken ruins may not be proof of civilizations beyond imagination, but of our own fragility, of the way memory transforms catastrophe into myth. Myths preserve the essence of loss, not the detail. What is remembered is not a map, but a warning. The sea gives, and the sea takes away. Still, when divers descend to Yonaguni's terraces, when sonar maps Doggerland's drowned plains, when artifacts are pulled from silt off Gujarat, the imagination stirs. Perhaps, beneath the waves, civilizations wait not to be proven, but to be remembered. The ocean, after all, does not erase completely. It preserves in its silence. What we call ruins may one day emerge again, revealed by chance or by persistence. Until then, they remain in the realm of myth, half seen, half imagined, suspended between memory and mystery. The chapter closes with the image of moonlight shimmering across a restless sea. Beneath its surface lie plains where hunters once walked, villages where fires once burned, temples where prayers once rose. Waves roll above them now, their rhythm eternal, their silence profound. Yet in that silence lies an echo, a reminder that civilizations may vanish, but memory remains, sometimes in stone, sometimes in story, and sometimes in the endless song of the ocean itself. From the beginning, humanity has looked upward, searching the night sky not only for guidance but for reflection. In the shifting constellations, in the glow of the Milky Way, in the wandering lights of planets, people saw more than stars. They saw themselves. The heavens became a mirror in which humanity sought its own origins, a canvas where questions of identity and destiny could be written. To look into the cosmic mirror is to face not only the immensity of the universe, but also the mystery of our place within it. For those who first settled villages, the stars were constant companions. They guided migration, marked seasons, and offered a map when the earth was dark. But beyond utility, the stars spoke to imagination. Were they fires of ancestors watching from above? Were they holes pierced in a vast dome through which eternity shone? In countless myths, the sky was not empty but alive, a realm of gods, spirits, and ancestors whose fates were entwined with ours. The cosmic mirror reflected not only nature's rhythm, but humanity's longing for continuity, for permanence in a world where everything else passed away. The idea that we come from the stars is far older than modern science. In Egypt, pharaohs were said to ascend to Orion, joining the gods in the belt of stars. In Mesoamerica, rulers were born of celestial lineage, their legitimacy tied to constellations that marked time and harvest. In Polynesia, the navigators who crossed vast oceans carried star maps not only as tools of travel, but as spiritual charts, each star a point of origin, a marker of ancestry. The cosmic mirror reassured humanity that life on Earth was not isolated, but part of something vast and eternal. Today, science tells us that our atoms were forged in stars, that the calcium in our bones and the iron in our blood are remnants of supernovae. In this sense, myth was never entirely wrong. The intuition that we are children of the cosmos resonates with truth. Yet, for ancient peoples, this was not chemistry, but mystery. To claim descent from the stars was to claim connection to eternity, to frame human fragility within an infinite story. The cosmic mirror reflected both smallness and greatness. We are dust, yet dust born of light. Myths of descent from the sky abound. The Dogon people of Mali speak of star beings who descended and brought knowledge, their stories curiously aligned with the existence of Sirius and its unseen companion star. In the Andes, Viracocha emerged from the waters and ascended to the heavens after shaping humanity. In the Pacific, ancestors are said to have come down on beams of light, bringing order to the earth. These myths blur the line between gods and visitors, between imagination and memory. Were they metaphors for the stars themselves, or did they preserve some older tale now refracted through the lens of reverence? Such stories stir speculation. Some argue they are evidence of contact, memories of beings who came from beyond. Others see them as poetic metaphors, humanity projecting its own yearning onto the night sky. The truth may lie between myths as expressions of awe, yet carrying fragments of events we can no longer fully grasp. Whether interpreted as divine or extraterrestrial, the fact remains. Humanity has always turned to the cosmos for reflection, for answers to questions too immense to be contained within the earth alone. The cosmic mirror also shaped time itself. The heavens revealed cycles beyond human lifespan, the slow drift of equinoxes, the wandering of planets, the rhythm of eclipses. To track these was to step outside the fleeting moment, to perceive a scale of existence vaster than one's own. Civilizations embedded these cycles in temples, calendars, and rituals. The Maya tracked Venus with astonishing precision, weaving its cycle into war and ceremony. Babylonian astronomers recorded the movement of Jupiter and Saturn, linking them to omens and fate. In such observations, the cosmic mirror became prophecy, a way to peer into the future by watching the past repeated in the stars. Yet the mirror was not always comforting. To gaze into it was also to feel insignificance. The vastness of the Milky Way, the cold brilliance of stars, reminded humanity of its fragility. Some myths spoke of sky gods who were distant, uncaring, or even hostile. The Norse believed the cosmos would one day end in Ragnarok, the sky collapsing, the stars falling, the world consumed. In Hindu cosmology, the universe itself cycles endlessly through creation and destruction, aeons turning like wheels, dwarfing human life. The cosmic mirror reflected not only connection, but vulnerability, the knowledge that the universe is not ours, that we are brief flames in an eternal expanse. And yet, even in the face of immensity, humanity sought meaning. To tell stories of the stars was to bind them to human fate, to make the infinite personal. Constellations became hunters, queens and animals, their patterns woven into tales of love, betrayal, triumph, and loss. By giving the stars names and narratives, people transformed chaos into order, creating a cosmos where humanity could feel at home. The mirror did not show indifference, it showed belonging, crafted by imagination's hand. Even now, the mirror stirs unease. When we send probes into space, When we gaze with telescopes at galaxies billions of light years away, we confront the same question our ancestors asked. Are we alone? The silence of the stars can feel haunting, as though the mirror reflects only ourselves. Yet perhaps the silence is not emptiness, but waiting. Perhaps the cosmic mirror shows us not absence, but possibility, an invitation to imagine futures as vast as the heavens themselves. The chapter closes with the image of a lone figure standing on a high plateau, gazing at a sky so clear, the Milky Way spills across it like a river of light. In that vast mirror, the figure sees not only stars, but memory, of ancestors who once looked up in awe, of civilizations that carved stone to align with solstices, of myths whispered by firelight. The heavens remain what they have always been, a mirror reflecting humanity's questions, magnifying its wonder, reminding us that to look outward is always to look inward as well. Every civilization believes, in its own time, that it stands at the pinnacle of history. Each imagines its walls will endure, its monuments will outlast the centuries, its knowledge will remain unbroken. Yet the earth remembers differently. Layer upon layer, ruin upon ruin, it shows us that permanence is an illusion. What we call progress is fragile. What we build is temporary, and what we know can vanish in the turning of a season. To walk among the remnants of past worlds is to realize that the future itself may already be buried, waiting one day to be uncovered as someone else's past. Archaeology is not only about the distant past, it is about the deep present. Every shard of pottery, every circle of stone, every wall half hidden by grass speaks to what once was, but it also whispers of what will come. For just as we uncover the lives of those who came before us, so too will our own lives one day be uncovered. Cities will crumble, roads will fracture, and monuments will fall. What we believe immortal will be fragile in the eyes of those who follow. They will piece together fragments of our world and wonder, as we do now, how it all fit together and why it was lost. Consider the ruins we revere today. The pyramids of Giza once gleamed with polished stone, reflecting the sun like a beacon. Now they are weathered, their glory reduced to outlines. The temples of Angkor were swallowed by jungle, their stone entwined with roots, their once bustling avenues silenced. The Mayan cities, once centers of power, lay hidden beneath forests until rediscovered. Each of these civilizations thought itself eternal, yet time carried them into silence. Is our own fate any different? The future buried in the past is not only about collapse, it is about continuity. Memory endures, even if only in fragments. What survives is unpredictable. A shard of clay, a coin, a scroll, or perhaps a digital archive carried on a fragment of glass. To those who come after, these remnants will be riddles, just as Göbekli Tepe or Stonehenge are to us. They will speculate on our rituals, our myths, our obsessions. They will marvel at our machines, perhaps unable to understand their purpose. They may even wonder if we, like the civilizations before us, carried memories of ages still older, stories passed down, transformed into myth, never fully explained. The lesson of the past is not despair, but humility. Civilizations rise and fall, but humanity endures, reshaping itself, carrying fragments forward. The flood did not end us, nor did fire, nor did famine. Each catastrophe left scars, but also memory, stories encoded in myth, structures aligned with stars, tools, and songs that carried survival. The past tells us that while the world changes, while resets occur, the thread of humanity continues, woven through resilience, imagination, and memory. And yet, we must ask, what will we leave behind? Will our future archaeologists, whoever they may be, uncover ruins of steel and concrete, skeletons of cities weathered by centuries? Will they puzzle over highways carved through mountains, tunnels beneath oceans, satellites rusting in orbit? Or will they find little at all, our works reduced to dust by time, our memory erased but for a few fragments, leaving them to wonder what kind of people we were? Perhaps the greatest question the past gives us is not what happened before, but how we will be remembered after. In myths of cycles, humanity has always sensed this truth. The Hindus speak of yugas, vast ages of creation and destruction. The Maya counted time in great cycles, each destined to end and begin again. The Norse spoke of Ragnarok, an apocalypse followed by renewal. Even science tells us that civilizations are vulnerable, that climate, catastrophe, or folly can reset the story at any time. The past is not only a record, it is a mirror showing us our own fragility. To ignore it is to step blind into the same abyss that swallowed those who came before. And yet, there is also hope. The same imagination that carved spirals into stone and aligned temples with solstices still lives within us. The same resilience that carried ancestors through the Younger Dryas, through eruptions and floods, still beats in our blood. If the future is buried in the past, then the past also lives in the future, carried forward not in ruins alone, but in spirit, in story, in the enduring human desire to remember. Perhaps that is why we tell these stories now, not only to honor what came before, but to prepare for what lies ahead. By remembering that civilizations fall, we are reminded to build with humility, to cherish what we have, to preserve what matters. By remembering that myths preserve memory, we are reminded to listen to stories, to search for truth even in metaphor. By remembering that the earth itself is restless, we are reminded to live not as masters, but as participants in a world far older and larger than ourselves. The final truth of the past is that it is never truly gone. It lingers in stone, in story, in silence. It lingers in the way we gaze at stars, in the way we fear the ocean, in the way we mark time by sun and moon. Even if civilizations fall, even if our own world one day lies in ruin, memory will persist. Someone will walk where we now walk, dig where we now build, and wonder what kind of people we were. The future is buried in the past, and the past is carried into the future, bound in a cycle as old as time itself. The story ends as it began, with firelight. Imagine a camp thousands of years from now, perhaps on Earth, perhaps elsewhere. Survivors gather, telling stories of the world that was. Around the flames, they speak of cities of glass, of machines that flew to the stars, of oceans that swallowed lands. They speak not as historians, but as storytellers, their words weaving memory into myth. And as they look upward to the same stars that watched over our beginnings, they will wonder, as we do, how many times has the slate been wiped clean? How many times has the story been retold? And how many more times will it be written again? The embers glow, the stars wheel, and the earth remains silent. Yet within that silence, memory persists. Civilizations may vanish, but humanity's search endures, searching in stone, in myth, in the sky itself, for meaning in the endless turning of time.